Hi, this is Peter Brown from Bio 108, and I'll be narrating the photosynthesis and a little bit of cell respiration lecture. So photosynthesis is a process that plants do, and algae can do it, and some bacteria do it. And what plants are able to do is they're able to take carbon dioxide and water, combine them using the energy of sunlight, and build glucose, which is a carbohydrate, and then oxygen gets released as a waste product. And so we can do lots of chemical reactions, but we can't make living molecules from non-living molecules. And plants are able to do that, and so if we trace back any food chain or food web, it starts with organisms that are autotrophs, organisms that can make organic molecules from inorganic molecules. And sunlight's a very interesting substance because it's energy that hits the planet Earth. So because it's energy, it travels at the speed of light, and it's energy that's made of electromagnetic radiation. So these are waves of energy that strike the planet, and they have different wavelengths. A small part of the electromagnetic spectrum is visible to our eye, and it turns out visible light is a part of the electromagnetic spectrum that plants use as well. So if you take the waves that run between 400 and 750 nanometers, that's visible light. And so instead of saying I'm looking at something blue, you can say I'm looking at something that's giving off 400 nanometer wavelength light. Okay? Instead of saying I'm looking at something green, you can say, oh, 500 nanometer electromagnetic radiation is hitting my eye. Instead of saying I see something red, you can say 700 nanometers electromagnetic radiation is hitting my eye. And this is showing the idea that this radiation travels as waves. The longer waves have less energy, things like radio waves. The shorter waves are more damaging. They can cause cancer, things like X-rays. And visible light, the light we see with our eyes, is somewhere in the middle. There's a 30-minute NASA video. Just watch the first 3.5 minutes, and I have some questions about that on the homework. So pigments in plants are colored molecules that capture light. The most abundant pigment in plants is chlorophyll, and there are two kinds of chlorophyll molecules, A and B. And so this is called an absorption spectrum of chlorophyll. They've shown different colors of lights through the chlorophyll, and they see what colors were captured and what colors were transmitted or passed through. And so the peaks show the colors that were captured, and the valleys show the colors that went through or transmitted. Okay, so blue light has a peak, so plants capture and use blue light very well. Red light has a peak, plants capture and use red light very well. And the green light is reflected or transmitted. So when we look at a plant leaf is green because the green light is being reflected. All right, so it's a little abstract, but let's see if we can figure this out. Let's compare matter versus electromagnetic radiation, the energy that comes from the sun. Okay, so something made of matter, your hand, a ball you're throwing, a pen you're holding, anything that has mass and takes up space is matter. Electromagnetic radiation, X-rays, gamma rays, visible light, that's all radiation. Does it have weight and occupy space? Sure, your hand and the pen both have weight and occupy space. X-rays, gamma rays, microwaves, visible light doesn't have any weight. You can put visible light where light is already standing, and so concentrated visible light is called a laser. So it's true for matter, but not for pure electromagnetic radiation. Does it travel at the speed of light? Matter, no. You can't get this pen going at the speed of light. But whether you have X-rays or microwaves or radio waves, they all travel at the speed of light. Give an example of how it interacts with matter. So if I have the pen in my hand, I can hold on to that pen. Electromagnetic radiation, if I'm out in the sun, I can feel the sun warming up my arms. If I put some water in the microwave, I can heat up that water with the microwave. So even though it's just radiation, it interacts with matter. Give an example of something made of this that is invisible. So gases are the obvious answer. So oxygen, nitrogen is in the air around us. It's part of the atmosphere, and yet we can see right through them. Electromagnetic radiation, anything except visible light would be invisible. Okay, so the visible part of the spectrum are the different colors we see, but we don't see microwaves, we don't see radio waves, we don't see X-rays. Here's a chloroplast. Here's where photosynthesis takes place. You don't have to know all the compartments of the chloroplast, but you should know that the thylakoid membranes are where the light-dependent reactions take place, and the liquid inside the inner membrane is called the stroma, and that's where the Calvin cycle occurs. So here's a nice map of the entire planet, and it tells you where photosynthesis is going on. So there's two different legends down here. One's for the ocean, and if you look at the ocean, the higher levels of chlorophyll is where there's more photosynthesis. So you can see the green is towards the land masses. So there's a lot more photosynthesis going on near the land masses. And so there's a lot more fish near the land masses because there's a lot more plants. Okay. Out in the deep ocean, it's dark blue. There's a lot less chlorophyll. So the deep ocean are kind of like the deserts. Okay, now here on the land, the same thing. You're using a different scale, and parts are green, have a lot of vegetation, and parts are yellow, have very little. And you can see like Arizona in the southwest, if you're in the desert, it's very little. So the yellow parts of the scale, here's the Sahara Desert. The yellow parts of the scale are the parts where there are deserts, and there's a lot less vegetation. So here's a chloroplast, and it's showing you the two processes that happen in the chloroplast. The light reactions, which happen in the thylakoid membranes, and they're going to take light, capture it, and use it to break water into oxygen and hydrogen. Oxygen is a waste product. Plants get rid of it. That's pretty good because as animals, we need oxygen. And then the hydrogen gets added onto carbon dioxide in what's called the Calvin cycle, and then the carbon dioxide gets turned into glucose. They don't write glucose here. There's actually a molecule called glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate that it gets turned into prior to glucose, but for your purposes, you think of glucose. All right, here's a really nice little video that goes through that from Ricochet Science, and I have 10 questions on the Canvas quiz that go along with this video. How do gases for photosynthesis get into the leaf? So carbon dioxide in and oxygen out, as well as water vapor out. They go in through little pores called stomata. So we're looking at the bottom of a leaf here, and you can see this little slit, and when the cells on either side of it are expanded, it opens up that stomata and gases can flow freely in and out. Here's a cross section of a leaf, and looking from the bottom, the stomata is open, and so those guard cells open up to allow gases to freely go in and out, and right above that stomata is a big airspace to allow gas exchange. There are biochemical adaptations in desert plants, as well as the kind of physical adaptations that we're used to. So we know that cacti lack leaves, that cacti have thick water-storing stems, but they open their stomata, which by the way are on their stems, at night rather than during the day. By doing that, when the stomata are open, they lose less water than if they were open during the day. Kind of cool. Okay, so one reason why plants are important to animals is they're consuming carbon dioxide and giving off oxygen, whereas animals are consuming oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide. So this is cellular respiration, and it happens in the mitochondria. in both animals and plants. So plants build their own food through photosynthesis, but then they break down their food through cell respiration. So cellular respiration shows glucose being oxidized, glucose plus oxygen, producing carbon dioxide, a waste product, and water. And you get energy from burning glucose. Glucose has quite a few calories in it, and that energy is used to build ATP. So just like this building runs on electricity, cells run on ATP, and usually we generate electricity by dams or coal or burning fossil fuels. The body takes different substances, and usually we show it as starting with glucose, and they burn these substances and use that energy to build ATP. So what kind of work do cells do? So chemical reactions, building things, building starch, glucose, proteins. Movement, so in plants, cell division. In plants, something called cytoplasmic streaming, where the chloroplast will circulate in a cell doing photosynthesis. In our cells, moving our body. All those kind of movements use ATP. And finally, transport. So pumping material across membranes, the plasma membrane definitely, but even the internal membranes, the nuclear membrane, the endoplasmic reticulum, and so on. So those are the kind of three work that the cells do, and it all requires ATP. They say an average cell uses about 10 million ATP per second. In other words, we need tons and tons of this stuff. Here's the mitochondria. Here's an electron micrograph, and this is the organelle where it happens. So sometimes when they draw cells, you'll see like one nucleus and one chloroplast. But cells might have 30 to 100 mitochondria, depending on what kind of cells they are and how much energy they need. And that's where ATP gets built. Sometimes people call the mitochondria the powerhouse of the cell. That's where the ATP gets generated. All right, so here's a nice picture showing the carbon cycle. So look at everything in this picture, and there are 4 boxes marked W, X, Y, and Z, and match it over here with the description. So fossil fuels are stored underground, and they store carbon. So pick one for that and go through these others and see if you can figure it out. Finally, let's do a last slide looking at photosynthesis versus cell respiration. Here's the equation of each. If you look at an equation, it's telling you you're combining these two molecules, and the atoms are getting rearranged to form these two molecules. Same kind of thing with cell respiration. You're combining these two molecules, rearranging them to form these two molecules. Okay. The two molecules on the left side of the arrow are called the reactants. Sometimes there can be more than two. The molecules on the right side of the arrow are the products. Okay. So find carbon dioxide. Is it a reactant or a product? So here it's a reactant, and here it's a product. So reactant and product. Look at oxygen. Think about where the energy comes from to drive photosynthesis. That's easy. Cell respiration is a harder one. So where do we get our glucose from if you're an animal? Okay, so we get it from the food we eat, but the energy to actually drive that reaction is in the bonds within the glucose molecule.